Welcome back to the One Soccer Nation podcast. I'm your host, Kareem Rae. Today, we're joined by Christopher Corey, owner and president of Walton and Hersham FC in England. Christopher brings a unique perspective operating inside both the US and UK soccer ecosystem, with firsthand experience in club ownership, player development, and league structure. This conversation goes beyond theory. We're diving into what actually is broken in American soccer, what the UK gets right, and what real structural change could look like ahead of the World Cup. Christopher, thank you so much for taking the time. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited that you and I had the ESP of wearing the same colored shirt, same button down. You look good, man. You look good.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It looks better on you though.
Pleasure.
Diving in to the first question, how did you get involved in the beautiful game, and what were the key moments that led you from, starting point into club ownership?
Well, I guess getting involved in the game, I was a shy kid, so the game was the game was everything. It was your best friend. It was what you looked forward to. It was your extreme passion. I love how when you're a kid, you can just singularly focus on one thing. I don't have a childhood memory that doesn't have a ball in it. So, I think that's where it starts. And, the journey through life, you're just so grateful to have something that's like a bedrock of, of, of what you go through in life. The game's always a piece of it, and it just kind of evolves. For me, it just has always evolved. Um, you know, Throughout the years, you'll move from one challenge to another, one business venture to another. But one of the things that always remained constant with me, at least, was that football was there somewhere, you know? So for me, it's the love of your life. It's the thing that brings you joy, the thing that brings you pain, the thing that brings you suffering sometimes, but just such a beautiful thing to have running parallel to everything else you have run in your life.
Yeah. What would you say has been your greatest memory in the beautiful game to date?
Wow. We just beat Farnham last Saturday, and that was big. I'm not going to lie. I know that that's a little strange since I'm 43 and I have a lot of great memories, but beating Farnham last Saturday was a big moment for the football club. In 2017, I was a part of Miami FC when we made a US Open Cup run, and we beat Atlanta United in extra time at an FIU stadium. That was a big one. Winning World Cup host candidacy June 16th, 2022. That was a big one. I could just kind of go on and on, but the thing, once you ask the question, I think the biggest moment for me was this last Saturday. It was a climax of years of work for the football club to be in a position to have a match that was that big, and we've had a few milestones like that over the last few years that I'm just always so grateful that we've worked that hard to give ourselves an opportunity and give the boys an opportunity to do something great, for Walton. So yeah, that definitely ranks up there.
Amazing. And just to dive a little bit deeper, why would you say it's such a special moment to you right now?
When you own a football club in the UK, it's 42 to 46 matches. I don't know. Leagues are different, but it is a marathon. It's 10 months, and I'm over there in 2025, almost, eclipse 4 months of the year in the UK. And, it's dark, it's rainy, it's cold. There's a lot of sacrifice and suffering that goes into it. And right now, there's 8 matches left in the season for us. Farnham have done an amazing job this season, and they're right there. So the fact, that the schedule sometimes has a little bit of like a serendipitous, magic to it. It was Farnham versus Walton at home. We were able to edge them. So that was a big moment, big moment. And so still plenty to go. I've mentioned that to you earlier. We're quite superstitious over there. So lots to go, but, we've worked very hard, and everybody at the club has sacrificed to get us to where we are. So let's hope that fortune stays on our side,
Amazing. Fingers crossed on my side, wishing you guys the best. What would you say, was there a specific turning point where you realized you wanted to be an owner or operator?
Yeah. Uh, pff, I've always wanted to be in football in one way or another. I've always been a supporter. I think owning a football club, for me and my personal journey, is me kind of attacking the apex of what it is that I do for a living. I've always been in sales. I've owned an ad agency. I've owned multiple ad agencies. I've touched different parts of business, and you need all of them to own a football club. I always say it's like 20 businesses in one, right? You are a merchandise brand. You are a hospitality brand. You are an event planning brand. You are a logistics brand. You are all of these things you have to be very efficient at. Accounting, you better be good at that, right? Football clubs, they lose money. That's a very normal thing. One of the things that makes Walton special is that we are stubbornly sustainable, right? We take our stewardship of the football club very seriously. And if you go chasing promotion by throwing a bunch of money at it and it doesn't work out, the next season you could be relegated because you have to cut all your budget. It's happened to 3 teams in our league this year. They've had to publicly announce we're cutting budget. We're cutting budget. It takes a lot of discipline, Kareem, because you'll be midway through the season, that January window comes and players are coming and going from all your competitors, and you have to have the discipline to say, I believe in this group that we've planned and worked on, all off season through half the season. I'm not going to go chase, a striker that's out of our budget. I'm not going to go chase, a key 8, that could change our season. And that's hard, man. I give a lot of credit to football club owners that are able to build a sustainable financial model, because it's not easy.
Yeah. You've just mentioned it that there's so many things to that are a part of operating a professional football club. Um, how were you able to learn all these different skills to operate a football club? Or is it a thing of maybe not knowing everything, but hiring the right people? So what would you say in that regards? What was the case for you in building your club?
Yeah, I'm a jump first, figure it out later guy. So the way I did it, I don't recommend it, right? I've jumped into lots of entrepreneurial initiatives. I've succeeded, I've failed. And I learned a lot from those experiences. Like I said, there's a lot easier way to develop the skill set of being a professional football club owner than jumping into whatever your passion is at the moment, like I have. But it certainly has given my perspective on how to run football clubs um, uh, more of a unique twist, because I've seen how failure happens. I see what a lack of discipline in business does because I've done it, right? I've chased things that I shouldn't have chased, right? And I didn't chase things I should have chased, right? So that experience has given me a unique perspective on how to build Walton the right way. And my partner and I are vigilant in how we approach it. There are very, very, very clear black and white lines we're not willing to go over, because you could be jeopardizing a football club that's been around since 1945. You could be jeopardizing its future by being indisciplined.
Got it. You've mentioned sustainability, which is not a place where a lot of clubs can get to. How were you and your partner able to get to sustainability for your club?
Not easy. Not easy. Um, Phew. I would say it's the power of saying no, right? You have to say no a lot. You have to be the bad guy. You have to be prepared to be disliked, especially at a football club when winning should be your goal, win football matches. And saying no might be jeopardizing winning football matches. So I would say that we have gotten to where we are because we know that this is what we want to do forever. And then we want to be able to pass it on to stewards of the football club that are like-minded. When a football club goes under, that is not a pretty thing. That's an entire community losing a piece of themselves. And to me is unacceptable. So that fear, if you want to know the truth, we've gotten to sustainability through fear, Kareem. Fear that we'll let the community down because we chase something we shouldn't have chased.
Understood. That's a good sense of fear that has helped you guys build the club. And I think that I got to see a little bit from an outside perspective, or as a fan watching, Welcome to Wrexham, how U.S. investors were going into to purchase Wrexham, watching it on the TV, but now getting an opportunity to speak with you and ask you personally, how was that experience coming as a US investor outside going into the UK and going through the whole process of due diligence and purchasing of a club and the response from the public, the government? How was that for you, and what context can you share with us?
I would say that I was wholly unprepared to become a part of the football club that operates day to day for the first year or two. I had so much to learn, and I wasn't, right. I think I was 18 months in before I took an active role in the UK. There is such a education gap between football in the US and football in the UK. I would say that they're an entire generation ahead of us. And I've been in this sport my whole life in one way or another. And 4.5 years ago, whatever it was, you find yourself like, with your feet on the ground in London going, I don't know anything about this sport, right? You're like, I am lost. What these guys are talking about, I have never heard before. I would say that comes down to the cultural aspects of the game, and you hear that a lot, right? What you really hear is it's different over there. Yeah, it's very different. It's very different. There are no conversations that aren't surrounding football in one way or another. I think their cultural obsession with the sport, has led to an advancement in their football IQ that we don't understand here in the U.S. We have no clue. Just put it that way. If we're being honest, you have to be honest to be able to progress. I'm very passionate about progressing American soccer, but we are lost. Not even close. So I had a lot to learn, and I'm still learning every single day. We brought in a non-executive director in Charlie Methvin, actually from Sunderland Till I Die. I know you watch Wrexham, but watch Sunderland Till I Die. You'll love that one. And Charlie's done amazing work at Sunderland. Now Sunderland's in the Prem. Charlton Athletic, now they're in the Championship. What he's really good at is laying the foundations for sustainability and growth. And that's why we've brought him into Walton to do the same thing he did on a much larger scale at Sunderland and a much larger scale at Charlton Athletic. So you have to be humble as an American over there, because we aren't to their level yet, culturally or in football IQ. That's my opinion. People may disagree, but I think it'd be hard to disagree with your feet on the ground there.
Right. It's such a small world. I believe I have seen Charlie um in Miami at Soccer X, and if I'm thinking about the right person, but
Yeah, you
I
are.
have watched Sunderland Till I Die, and it was such a great documentary. And when I'm in that documentary on Netflix, it showcased the club's history, the fans, consistently um, supporting the club through relegation, um, and and it showed that you can't duplicate real estate, and it takes time to build history. And I don't know exactly what level the club got regulated to, but it was like Division 4, Division 5, around there. Don't quote me, guys. But private equity still came in and purchased, so it still showed, how valuable a football club is as an asset. And rightfully so, it's back at its place in the Prem. So it's a great documentary. And there's definitely more on the list I want to watch 100%. But yeah, no, those are two good ones. With saying that, I also want to just touch on your club. You mentioned it, 1945. Like, that's 100 plus years. Uh, the club has been around for 100 plus years, if I'm doing my math right quickly in my head, but or close.
So 1895 became a football club, and then in 1945, Walton and Hersham came together after World War II. So yes, you have it right. You could say people do say 130 years because that's how long the football club's been kind of up and operating. But the official start date was 1945. That's what's on the badge. But that is a ton of history. And you feel it. The way that you feel it, Kareem, is that people will just stop you randomly and go, hey, I played for Walton. And you're speaking to like a 60-year-old man. We have an 80-year-old volunteer named Merv who is unbelievable. Love Merv. And Merv's been a Walton fan for 60 plus years, and he's been involved at the football club over 50, right? I think in the US right now, our longest standing continuous club was like 1993 or something like that, right? I know in Miami, it's Miami United. And I think that was like, I don't know, 2005 or 7, so these are, again, this is where the cultural obsession piece comes in. And that's something that I believe really needs to change. And I would say with 100% certainty, the reason we don't have cultural obsession for soccer in the United States is leadership decisions. We've made poor leadership decisions that have led the sport in a bad direction in the United States and hampered, it didn't hamper growth, Kareem. The growth is there. It literally put a ceiling on the growth and said, this is just going to be a youth sport here in the US, right? Because there's really nothing above it that makes any sense. So yeah, I would say that until we start that timer of creating a infrastructure and a landscape and a vision for the sport that can kind of be a catalyst to that cultural obsession, we're going to be behind forever, right? We're just not doing it right.
Yeah. It's definitely something that needs time in my perspective. MLS has been around for 30 years. The EPL has been around for 100 plus years. So it's definitely going to be, it's one of the things is going to be time, as well as governance. We're going to tap into that. I think I have 2 more questions here, in regards to your club. But before I ask these 2, I just want to ask you at a personal level and being on the ground, in regards to fans, I experienced fans and, going to an MLS stadium at Toronto FC and it's completely different versus being in the UK, being in Everton's home stadium against Arsenal and basically standing up the whole game versus in Toronto, we were sitting majority of the game, right? Like there's a different type of atmosphere for you, for your club where you guys are at, the level that you guys are playing at. How's the atmosphere?
So playing in non-league is a different experience for players and supporters. So, we have players that have played in the English Football League in big stadiums. And when they come to play for us, the first thing they say is they were shocked that the level was as good as it was. Because you think dropping down a few leagues, but the level is very high. And it makes sense, right? Because the non-league football is comprised of a different kind of set of profile of players. A lot of players who have played in the English Football League and are dropping down. A lot of youth academy, Prem Academy players that perhaps didn't get their contract have dropped down to work their way up. And then you have your good community, quality players that have grown up in that community and are fabric to that football club. But the second thing they say is the supporters are right on top of you. So in non-league, right, when you have 3,000, 2,000, 3,000 fans, but they're lining the field, right? And behind the goal, you have your set of supporters screaming at the goalkeeper the entire match. The banter back and forth between non-league supporters and the away keeper is brilliant, Kareem. If you ever get a chance, I hope I can host you in Walton. You stand behind the goal and you give it to the goalkeeper and he gives it back for 90 minutes. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. Again, another little cultural piece. So what I would say is very different. One of the things I like that you mentioned is how you're standing the whole time in Everton. If you sit down in the UK, a supporter is going to tell you to get up, right? Right? I dare you to go to Liverpool and try and sit in your seat or not sing or not be a part of it. They're going to tell you to get up, right? And again, it's just another cultural piece, that is just so important to the sport. So if you were sitting down in Montreal, you're standing at Everton, and Walton, you are either around the pitch screaming at the goalkeeper or the ref, or up in the stand, right? And it tends to be the older demographic are up in the stand. With the programs and, their routines, they're very routine based. But I always stand behind the goal. Yeah, it's the purest form of football right there. Keeper makes a save, he gives it to you. A bad goal kick, you give it back. It's good. It's good stuff, man.
Nice. No, I definitely want to catch a game with you. Well, that's. I'm going to add that to my list. We definitely have to do it. Um, you're currently in a position where Walton and Hersham FC could win the league this season. Take me inside that experience. What does it actually feel like operating in a system where every match has real consequences?
Well, that's the sport. That's the sport in the form that it should be in. I didn't know that until I was there, right? The pinnacle of my like semi-pro experience on the business side was an Open Cup run, right? So what I would say to you is that it is a cocktail of part excitement, anticipation, pain, suffering, all of it. The moments just become so big. You're just kind of waiting there, waiting to feel extreme joy or extreme pain, and that's 40, it's 42 matches or like that. Where we are in the table now, we don't really concern ourselves with that. We have to go to Tiverton away on Saturday. And so the whole football club's just focused on that, and that's a big piece of what we do. We don't look beyond the next Saturday or the next Tuesday because you can get every team in the English football pyramid. When you're in these leagues, every team can hurt you. Top of the table, bottom of the table, everyone can hurt you. And again, that's because if they're a team battling to get out of potential relegation, they're going to fight like hell. If they're a team battling to get into a playoff spot, fight like hell. If they're a team, second or third trying to catch the potential title winners, the league winners, they're going to fight like hell, right? So you don't have any things that you see a lot in the NBA, and in closed leagues where teams, they what do they call it? Flop the season or whatever. I don't even know what they call it, where they basically stop trying so that they can get a high draft pick. That doesn't exist. That doesn't exist in pro rel. I know in the NBA, it's really big, right? In the NFL, if you're not going to make the playoffs, why would you continue to spend money and fight when you can just finish last and get the number one draft pick, right? That doesn't make any sense. If you do that in promotion relegation, you're going down. And a relegation, I've never experienced it personally, but I've seen it through the eyes of colleagues. It's awful. You lose your players. The supporters are all over you. They're calling for the ownership to be out, and rightly so. I would say that that's another big piece of football in the UK is the supporters are powerful. The second they start saying, the owner's name and out or the manager's name and out, you're in trouble, right? They put their money where their mouth is. They may stop showing up to matches. They may start bashing you online. And again, it's all fair because your job as a football club owner is to protect their investment of time, money in the football club. You're spending their money mostly. I know people don't like to hear that, but that's football clubs. Sustainable football clubs are run off of supporter money. So if I'm doing a bad job spending the supporters' money, they have every right to kick me out. That's my view.
Understood. Yeah, no, great perspective, 100%. Quick follow-up on this. What have you learned about building a winning culture at that level? It's definitely not something easy to do.
Yeah, I would say on the business side is stay the hell out of the football side, right? One of the biggest problems you have. I actually really liked Tom Brady's documentary. It made me laugh because I had been in the UK for a few years. And, Tom Brady being, the greatest quarterback of all time is great, but he is a cringy American when it comes to let's go, blah, and you saw he went into Birmingham City and he got involved in the football. And then I think they finished last or something. I forgot. I think they got relegated. And then I think you realize that the business side stays away from the football side 100%. That is my partner is our sporting director. He will never hear from me, play this guy, bench this guy, never, right? That is his entire life is running the sporting side of the football club. I've got all these things going on. How in the world am I going to call him and say, hey, bench this guy? I mean, that is so out of line. But you see owners do it all the time. They get their hands involved. So I would say part of creating a winning culture is to stay out of it, right? Having the discipline to stay out of the sporting side when you are an owner and operating on the business side.
Understood. Definitely noting that one down for sure. For myself, with saying that, switching gears, you've now experienced both the US and UK systems up close. What was the biggest moment where you realized how different those two ecosystems actually are?
I think it was the first day I was in Walton, right? You and this has happened so many times. You're, like the hotel you're staying at doesn't have laundry, so you're going to the laundromat, and the person there is talking to you about football, right? Then you get in an Uber, and the guy in the Uber knows more about the team than you do, right? And you're just like, what kind of amazing parallel universe am I in? I have landed in a place where all anyone talks about is football, right? I can go, I'm sitting in a grassroots football facility here in Florida, and I can speak to 20, 30 parents with them, no one bringing up the sport, even though their kids are playing it, right? That would never happen. If you transport me 4,000 miles away to Walton, that would never happen, right? So I think it's that small piece. I recognized right away something was different here. And again, you always hear that it's different, right? But that's when I realized, hey, I'm out of my league, and I got a lot of learning to do.
Yeah, I think it was one of my favorite experiences. Like when we were down in England for soccer for 6 weeks, every hub we passed, there was football being played on TV. Like there wasn't one place that wasn't playing a game. And I remember another great experience of mine. Me and my buddy, we went to a hub. We were underage, but they were the sweetest owners of the bar and said, "Hey, yeah, if you guys want a drink or juice, non-alcoholic drink, of course, enjoy yourself. You guys could take this spot and stay as long as you guys want." We stayed and watched at least, I think, 3 games. We were in there for hours. I think we
Amazing.
only purchased like 2 drinks, and everyone was cool. So it was amazing. I had never done that before, and I think it was such a beautiful experience to have experienced that.
I think that England might have a few things wrong, right? But the things they do incredibly well, like best in the world, I would call the football and community. They like that pub owner. They're very community based to their core, right? Whereas community a lot of times in the US can end up just being a buzzword, right? It's not there. It means something. So I think those two things they do incredibly well because it's not the weather, promise.
Yeah, definitely not.
Right? It's not the weather. I feel like, as somebody who's been in love with this game since he was, 3, 4 years old, whatever it is, when you experience football in the UK for a long period of time, you grow to appreciate how special it is. And I'm a big fan of the fact that now even the government is now protecting. They have a government regulator over the football clubs now. And typically I'm not a government overreach guy, but I think what they're doing is making sure they protect what they have and how special it is.
Absolutely. I think I gotta say it again. I know you already said it, but it's definitely not the weather in England. It's nowhere near Florida. It's
Yeah.
always gray clouds. It's raining. But I think the people, though, the people are amazing too. They're some of the nicest people I've ever met too. They're just wonderful people, and again, enjoy football. It was a really good experience. I gotta say, like amazing. With saying that, one of the themes you mentioned is change in American soccer. If you had to define it clearly, what specifically needs to change right now?
So I would say that we are in a window of opportunity that we are not even coming close to capitalizing on. A World Cup is a definitive moment for a country with regards to the sport and should be a time when the country looks inside itself a bit to how it operates within the sport, right? Um, and it's a massive opportunity, and we're not doing it, right? We need change. Change, uh, change that meaningful, right? There's so much money around the sport in the US. It's not like that's a problem. But how we are going about executing the sport in the United States is backwards. And there are a few elements that just need to change, and they're very realistic, Kareem. I would say the biggest one is helping grassroots football clubs, right? Hickory, North Carolina, averaging 8,000, 9,000, whatever it is. They're getting massive attendances. Annapolis Blues in Maryland. There's all these opportunities. Why do we not have a system where these clubs who have found something special in their community are protected, not protected, but boosted? Let's get in there. Why isn't the U.S. Soccer Federation knocking on the door, saying, do you know the U.S. Soccer Federation has 0 grants or support for local grassroots clubs? 0. And these are the people that are reaching to what U.S. soccer needs, which is the next generation. They always need the next generation of soccer players, right? These local grassroots clubs are the people doing that job. And when they succeed on a massive level with barely any resources, right? What happens to them? Nothing. And that's the change that needs to happen. It needs to stop being nothing, Kareem, and it needs to start being, okay, we understand that this community is now, absolutely fanatical about this grassroots football club you built. Let's help you with the next steps to continue your growth. I mean, you saw with Detroit City, right? Detroit City, congratulations to those guys to figuring out how to work through these steps. Because let's say you're a UPSL club in a very small town in Tennessee, and all of a sudden you have 4,000 or 5,000 fans showing up to your football matches. To go to USL 1, you need a 3,000 to 5,000 seat stadium in a very good piece of real estate. You need 5 to 10 million in a franchise fee. You need all your travel costs, all of these things. And that's okay, right? That's what the USL requires for USL 1. But there is no vehicle for that grassroots football club to even take steps to get anywhere near that, right? And so, again, you just have a broken system. It is so disjointed that the change that needs to happen is we need very smart, very courageous, very ambitious and aggressive leadership to go in and start building bridges between our disjointed organizations here in the U.S. I think that without it, Kareem, we will always be the country that European and South American clubs come to set up camps or whatever to make some money. They're basically coming in and dropping an ATM machine with their brand and saying, here, give us your money. You guys aren't a serious footballing country. So, but we know that you have a lot of money and you'll spend a lot of money on it. So here you go, right? That's not meaningful progress at all. These things are very solvable. And the fact that as a country, the leadership in the sport in the country does not seem interested in fixing these very fixable problems. And that bothers me.
And, I was just listening to a podcast episode. I think it's called the Soccer Business Podcast, hosted by Simon Evans. Hopefully I'm remembering this properly. He had the founder of the New York Cosmos on his one of his recent episodes, and he had shared that there were some rules, like, for example, minimum, I think for D1 back at a certain time, that a stadium size had to be 15,000 seats. But there was these certain type of requirements that were set up by the United States Soccer Federation to block certain markets from entering because they wanted to push other sports like baseball, so on and so forth. So we're talking about some heavy hitters, some big boy plays here, but is that something? So the reason I bring that up is that something to do in today's date, where at a federation level that there's still influence of wanting to pursue other sports, or what are the blockers to prevent from these changes that you mention or think that could be changed? What is my question is, what is the reason why it's not being changed?
That's a great question, Kareem. Probably the best question I've heard somebody ask is, why is the reason that it's not being changed? In my view, we are a footballing country that built a model which doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. Everybody knows it doesn't work. It is the worst kept secret. And And for business reasons only, with no sporting concern at all, we are protecting our really crappy model, right? So Mark Cuban had a great quote. He said, when you are a sports business owner, right? He owned the Dallas Mavs, right? You can't make decisions just based on money, right? Because there's a lot more to sport business than money. And I think Don Garber would laugh at that statement, right? I think he has zero concern for sporting interests, right? And that lack of balance in the leadership of the sport in this country is our problem. That's why it doesn't want to change. We are all money and club valuations and real estate and zero sporting interest. And the way that they try and balance it, right, is they bring in international stars. And that's great. It works for business, right? It works for business. It doesn't help grow the sport in the US. It doesn't. So they may have all the metrics in the world, but us here on the grassroots that have been operating grassroots programs for a long time, we can tell you what they're doing has zero impact on the sporting interest in the grassroots level. Effectively for kids, right? We are selling kids an unfinished sporting product, right? We just are. If I was speaking to your kid, Kareem, and he wanted to play, I don't know, basketball, football, baseball, right? I could go, this is how this goes. Boom, 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 right? If your child wanted to play football, sorry, we'll call it soccer in the US. If your child wanted to play soccer, I would say, okay, this is how this goes. And then it branches off into 7 different disjointed, crazy ideas, and you're left alone to figure it out, right? You could go to college and probably sit on the bench next to a 25-year-old Icelander, former pro. That sounds great. You could go maybe try and get on a League 2 or a UPSL team, but they're disjointed and they're not connected to anything for progression, right? You could go the MLS youth pathway, but I heard a statistic the other day that only 20 MLS homegrown players have ever made the jump to MLS teams out of 100,000 or whatever it is. So that pathway doesn't work. You can try and get yourself over to Europe, which with an American visa, not that easy, right? I mean, there's, again, when we talk about the major sports in this country, most of them would die to have the youth participation soccer does. They would kill for it, right? But they don't need that much because they've figured out the other pieces for their sport, right? The way that soccer works and football globally works, right? The United States decided to do it differently, and then we've held on to that bad decision for business purposes. And it needs change.
So my next question is, who actually has the power to drive that change? That's
another great question. I'll tell you what, man, no wonder you have your own podcast. That's a phenomenal question. And I'll be honest and say that at the top levels of the intricacies of leadership at U.S. Soccer, or the U.S. Soccer Foundation, I don't know much about that. I do know that when you watch, that there will be candidates for president of U.S. Soccer every once in a while, and they have different ideas, and they never get in. I think that it's, again, Don Garber's on the board of U.S. Soccer, right? The new U.S. Soccer training facility was built by Arthur Blank, who owns Atlanta United. So the guy who owns Atlanta United in the MLS just built a $50 million facility for the entity that's supposed to regulate him in the MLS. Does that not scream conflict of interest? Right? That is madness, Kareem. Madness. That could never happen. How is U.S. Soccer going to say anything to Arthur Blank? They're not. Right? They're going to say, yes, sir. That's what they're going to say. And again, our federation has put themselves in a point where it seems like to me that they just have to say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, to everybody instead of doing their job. And it's kind of sad. So again, going back to the theme, Would love to see change, would love to sit in conversations and hear the justification for why we're not looking to make extreme changes in this window leading up to the World Cup.
Got it. If you were designing the pyramid today, what would that pathway actually look like?
Another great one. Man, dropping fantastic questions here. So, um, I would build that bridge between, I think the UPSL has done an amazing job, right? And the UPSL has different divisions, and you can be promoted within the UPSL's divisions. So they technically have a 5th division and a 4th division, right? I think that the bridge between the UPSL and the USL needs to be built. I think that USL 1 really should be the 3rd tier over MLS Next Pro. I would say that the MLS, there needs to be a bridge built between USL Championship and MLS. MLS has built the big stadiums. They've done it. They've done an incredible job building a business, right? But what they've not done is actually build the product that the customer wants to see. Yeah, linear TV ratings, USL Championship and MLS on regular TV, cable TV are comparable, right? That doesn't include behind their paywall or whatever, but I think that to me that shows that the MLS product for the customer is not something that the general common man football fan wants to watch, right? But I have a question for you. If Messi and Inter Miami are having a bad season and they might be in relegation, what do you think the viewership on that would be? That would be
Everyone would watch.
blockbuster, man. If Arthur Blank, and this is what makes it so great, right? And Atlanta United just built a $50 million facility for U.S. soccer, but they are crap on the pitch this year, and they might go down. Everyone's going to watch that. It's drama. It's storytelling. It's beautiful, man. And again, you listen to Don Garber's quotes about it, and he goes, why would they? Why would the owners vote for this? 100%, right? If they're thinking purely business. If they're thinking sporting and football, then they're thinking that guy across the table, I'm going to beat you, right? So I ain't worried about being relegated. That guy's going to get relegated, not me. And if people think that, highly successful, competitive business people don't like to compete, you're not paying attention, right? So I think there is a deal to be made where MLS is the top tier, USL Championship, USL 1, UPSL, UPSL 2. You're done. That's beautiful. Instead, Kareem, we're about to have MLS, USL Premier, right? And then on the women's side, and NWSL and the Super League. I mean, we look really stupid. That's all I'm going to say. Like we look really stupid. If you looked at that through the lens of like a European, South American, Asian, whatever, pure footballing countries, and you go, wait, you're going to have 2 tier 1 leagues? How does that, what is that, Kareem? I'm embarrassed. That's embarrassing. We gotta stop being embarrassing, man. And again, smart, educated, in the game, competitive people here in the United States, they'll figure out how to make it work, right? It's just going to take a leap of faith, a lot of courage, great leadership. And this is the moment. The World Cup's here in 3 months. This is the moment we can get it done. But I always say but because you just get let down time and time again,
Yeah. It's super interesting because nowhere around the world, from my knowledge, has 2 Division 1 leagues for both on the men's side or on the women's side, as you just mentioned. Only in the US does that exist to date. But what are your thoughts on USL pushing for Pro Rel? They're going to have a pyramid of 3 different divisions, 1, 2, and 3. What are your thoughts on that, with USL pushing that forward?
I commend them on their courage, right? That's a big gamble, right? It's a gamble. I don't know, I've read everything that there is to read about it. It seems to be on the outset based on sporting merit heavily. So I applaud them in that effort. I think that it's going to be the product. I think that their linear TV ratings, which is, when you think about paywalls, That's not the common man. That's not grassroots. That's not football. FIFA will tell you that the grassroots supporter is who drives the sport. I've heard him say it, right? So cable TV and free or inexpensive streaming services, they are your customer telling you whether your product is good or not. The USL is about to inject in 2028. They are going to inject drama into the sport. These clubs that have been operating for a long time, they can no longer have an off year. If you have an off year, you're relegated. That's how it goes, right? So I commend them on that effort. I think it's incredible, and I believe that the American soccer supporter, the reason that they watch the Prem, Bundesliga, La Liga, they watch it because it's a better product, right? It just is. It's a better product. There's more drama. There's more storylines. There's more passion, right? And football is about passion. So I think that they're going to have all that. And when they have it, I hope that it forces MLS to make some kind of deal, because I think their linear numbers are going to go down unless Messi's in town. And I don't think Messi, he's the guy's an absolute alien, incredible, like godsend of a player, but I don't think he can play until he's 50, right? And players like that don't come along all the time. Who can you bring into the United States that would have that same impact 5 years from now?
Yeah. Does a player come to mind that comes close to Messi, or no, not at all?
When I said it, I was thinking Mbappe. When I said it, I was thinking that. I don't. That's probably who they'll bring. And again, Kareem, beautiful business, beautiful, genius business. Sporting, don't really think that one peaks in the sporting interest part of the sport. So
yeah, I'm actually curious to ask you about this one too. Is player transfers? So MLS has brought in a lot of talent overseas. Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Messi, Suarez, Sergio Busquets, Jordi Alba, Müller from Bayern Munich, Son from Tottenham Spurs, in the EPL. There's a lot of superstar talent that the MLS has brought over, but in regards to the other way around, there has been a few player transfers, but that's still a building pipeline. I wanted to get your thoughts on that, on US transferring players to other countries.
100%. We should be exporting them as fast as we can. Look at Jordan Morris. Do you remember Jordan Morris, Seattle Sounders? Jordan Morris played for Stanford, I think. And then he was big. He was going to go to Europe, stayed in the MLS, kind of halted his career. But I think he's mentioned, I don't want to quote it because I'm not sure, but I think he's mentioned that was the wrong decision. You need to get into it's, and people think it's the football. Yes, the football is more detail oriented, but it's the culture that you need to become engrossed in to become a world-class player. Why has the United States, ready for this? Why has the United States not produced a world-class player? That our closest thing to a world-class player, and some wouldn't even say he is Christian Pulisic, and he wasn't developed in this country, right? Developed in Germany. So again, that's the closest we've ever come. Now, again, with our population, with our resources, how come we're not churning out world-class players when a country like Brazil churns them out a lot? I would say that's culture.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%. Christopher, I want to switch gears here. You've also built a massive digital following with Walton and Hersham FC. How intentional was that strategy, and how important is media in building a modern football club?
I think it's about being authentic, right? And that following came, a lot of it started way before me, right? Because Walton and Hersham is famous for being the world's youngest football club owners. So there were 7 friends that bought the club for £1 so that it didn't fold. And when they did that, they started really a journey of storytelling. And I think we're at 1.1 million on TikTok. We have a very good YouTube, Instagram, all of that. And again, we're being authentic and telling the story of the next chapter. All those boys have moved on except one of them, right? So they're definitely not the world's youngest football club owners because I'm involved now. But it's definitely the one who's running the sporting side is, and I think you'll start to see one of our strategies is to continue to tell his story because the football is the story, right? I would say media. I've seen so many do it different ways, but I would say that when you get it right, it can be part of the soul of the football club. When you get it wrong, it can be very plastic and almost a bad thing. So I think like anything, you need to get it right. You need to spend time thinking about who you are as a football club. More importantly, who you are as a community, right? Because football clubs represent communities. That's it, right? That's what they are. And they need to be viewed that way. So I would say media is a bad thing if you're just trying to grow media for the sake of media. If you're trying to amplify a community and bring the right message with that community along, it can be part of the DNA of the football club.
Do you see media as a revenue driver, a fan acquisition tool, or both?
I would say I see media as a supporter touch point of respect. So I might need to reword that. I think the football club owes the supporters the respect of telling them what's going on in the football club. And media at its best should be telling that story for the supporters in the community. That would be priority number one. As a revenue driver, I mean, commercial partners really look into what your media platform looks like. So I would say that those two are linked. And being good to your commercial partners is so pivotal. So I would definitely see it having that link there. But I don't think media is what everybody leans into it as being, if that makes sense, right? I think it gets buzzed too much and people forget who they owe media to, if that makes sense, right? You don't owe media to your bank account, right? It shouldn't be let's make money off of this. You owe media to the supporters and to the surrounding community. That's who's owed that work.
Understood. Okay, Chris. So you've mentioned the concept of the murder pyramid in US soccer where clubs continuously fold. What's fundamentally broken in the economics of these clubs?
So I like that you giggled a bit when you said murder pyramid. That is a wicked term, isn't it? But I think it gets attention, and you'll see it on Twitter quite often. Here it is in closed systems. The club has a good year. It performs extremely well. Then now there's a ceiling on growth. There's nowhere to go, right? There's nowhere to go that has more exposure. There's nowhere to go that potentially has broadcast deals, right? There's nowhere to go that can give your supporters something to be excited about moving forward. So I would say that it's not so much the financial models of the grassroots clubs to why they're closing versus the system of the country in which they sit in, right? When these clubs do fold in pro rel systems all over the world, but typically somebody comes in and picks it up, right? Now, I have a question for you, Kareem. Why would somebody come pick up a folded football club?
Because of the value that they see, the potential value that they see that they want to invest in.
Potential. You just said potential, right? So people come in and they pick up the pieces from a folding football club like my partner did at Walton. Why? Because he sees the potential in it. And what is potential in football?
Opportunity for growth.
Opportunity for growth. Now we're in a system, though, where you're not allowed to grow beyond a certain point unless you have $20 million, right? So it doesn't matter if you and I start a football club, Kareem, in the U.S., and we're getting 5,000 people through the gates, right? If you and I can't individually go find an investor with $20-30 million net worth, which is what you need in USL 1, right? We're not going anywhere, man. And there's no bridge to help us, right? So we did it, Kareem. In the toughest part of it is always the sporting side, right? So we did it on the sporting side, and there is no potential for opportunity. There is no reward. There is no growth. There is no nothing. You just stay, right? And a business this would probably just go back to economics 101. A business that's treading water is typically just going to drown, right? So you have these football clubs that deserve growth and opportunity, right? And our system is disjointed in a way where they hit a ceiling and they start treading water. No matter how much they love that football club, there's no excitement, there's no growth, there's no nothing. So they go out of business. Hence the murder pyramid. And then the most important part of that, Kareem, is that nobody comes to save that football club, right? Whereas in other countries, when clubs fold because an owner was overzealous, spent too much money, put the football club in debt, a lot of ways, that football clubs are purchased, they're purchased by individuals coming in and clearing the debt, and then they own the football club, right? Why would they do that? Why do they do that in Europe, South America, Asia, all over the world, but they don't do it in the United States? It's because of our system. It's a disjointed model. So the financial model of the club owners is not the problem. It's the model created by the federation, who is pretty much controlled by individuals that have a conflict of interest.
Got it. So, I mean, I think one of the most recent ones with MLS, I think it was the recent one, was in the market of San Diego, where you had San Diego Loyal, I think, at the USL Championship level. And then you got San Diego FC from the MLS level come in and just basically wipe out the San Diego Loyal at USL Championship, and that's basically it after all the capital, time, and hard work being put in there.
Even took the CEO, I think. I think they even took the CEO. I mean, so savage, right?
Wow.
So basically, San Diego Loyal built a sustainable football club, but there's nowhere for them to go, nowhere to be promoted to, nothing, right? So they're treading water, and the MLS says, oh, that's a good market, right? Come in and not only take all of the hard work, but also the CEO, man. That's savage work, right? So again, you just nailed it. You just absolutely nailed it. I think Georgia Tormenta was a USL One club. They just went under, or they're not competing this year. That's what they're doing. They're not competing this year. I'd like to see what happens with them. In Miami, Miami Fusion, Tampa Bay Mutiny. Those were MLS clubs. Nobody came and saved those things. Actually, Miami Fusion, somebody restarted Miami Fusion in the grassroots level, and then it folded again. So how many times are we going to get whacked in the head in this country before we make change to how we approach this sport? Or are we just going to continue getting whacked in the head for the benefit of who? It's not the kids, it's not the supporters, it's not the fans, it's not anything. Who's benefiting? Good question
Right.
to ask.
I mean, so in your position where you're at right now in the football or soccer world, do you see change happening anytime soon in the US?
I do. I think that this next generation was raised. Although the MLS will wish they were raised on MLS, they weren't. I think they were raised on Premier League. I think they were raised on La Liga, Bundesliga. I don't think they're going to stand for it. I think you're going to have a point, and I don't know when it's going to happen, but you're going to have a point where it's not just getting whacked on the head. People are going to realize it's just the model is so broken that it's going to break, right? And when it breaks, it'll be about who's in a position to have the opportunity to lead forward. I'll be honest, I don't see anybody in US soccer leadership that I follow most of them. I don't see anyone there that I think has the courage or the leadership to make necessary changes. So I do think somebody will come along to do that. For me, it's a real shame because I'm passionate about American soccer, and I hope that we get on the right track. And the USL, kudos to them. That could be it. I can see some good leadership coming out of the USL if they become more powerful and more prominent. They have shown a good bit of courage in this move. So, I hope that some of their ownership or leadership, executive leadership, will take hold and start moving the country in the right direction.
Absolutely. One fun quick question, with the World Cup coming up in the next few months here, in June 2026. That's going to have a new format, 3 countries hosting it for the first time: Canada, US, Mexico, 48 teams, more games being played. Who do you want to see in the semifinals? Who are your top 4 teams that you want to see play in the semifinals? And we're going to get this on record, right? So when this happens, we'll watch this back and be like, we'll see how right you were.
Listen, I'm a blindly, what do they call that, where you're so patriotic that you're kind of dumb about it? I forgot what the term is, but so the United States will be there. I think I'd love to see. I always love to watch Spain play. I think Spain plays beautiful football. So, me personally, who would I like to see? I'd like to see one of the Asian countries. They are really not not they're not underdogs anymore. I think anybody who looks at the Asian countries as underdogs has not been paying attention. If you don't follow any of like the Korean football youth academies, you should. Oh, they're on Instagram. They're incredible. So I believe, I would love to see one of the Asian countries make it to the semifinals. Spain, then the United States and England, just because the United States does well against England, and it has to be the worst feeling for the British they drew against us in the last World Cup. We beat them previously. I mean, can you imagine when your entire culture and heritage is around this sport and you get beat by a bunch of Americans with the worst system of football in the world? We are by far have the worst system, us in Australia. But I think Australia is going to Pro Rel. But yeah, so those are my 4. Great question. One of the Asian countries, Spain, England, and the United States.
Sure.
I could go for a Pulisic winner against England. 100%.
I wouldn't mind. Wouldn't mind at all. I think you mentioned some good teams. I actually just seen the Spain jerseys recently online, and they look really good. And Spain.
Who are you for?
My
Who are you
4
for?
is Spain, France, England,
All right.
and probably Argentina. I
Wow.
kind of do want to see Ronaldo win the World Cup, but I don't know if that's possible. But I think a game I'm excited to see if because I haven't been really paying attention, but I really want to see Canada play Italy.
I was going to touch on that. I know you're Canadian, so I was going to touch on that because the Canadians, listen, you've got my coach. If it were up to me, Jesse Marsh would have been coaching the United States. Jesse Marsh or BJ Callahan, right? Love BJ Callahan, right? Don't know why, U.S. soccer decided to go for a foreign coach. I just don't understand that. But again, congratulations, because he's driven your program forward because he's good, and I think he's got a bone to pick with the United States, with his home country, because they screwed him out of that job. Wow. So, and you got talent, man. Talent.
Yeah. The Canadian national team has come a long way. I think Qatar was good for them to get their feet wet, and then it's going to be interesting to see what happens this year. So yeah, definitely looking forward to it. And I think for in regards to Canada has the talent. It's just the system. We're way far behind. I mean, the CPL has been around since 2019, so we're looking at 7 years. It's very young, and we have the same infrastructure issues here as the US. So it goes hand in hand. But with saying that, I do have some rapid fire questions before we close off here. Um, so one thing the UK football system gets right that the US doesn't.
Everything. There are 22 leagues in a beautiful little aligned thing. You and I could start a football club in the 22nd tier of English football and go all the way to the Prem, and it's not impossible, right? The Dorking Wanderers, you should look up that guy. He started in tier 17, and he's potentially going to win the league, and he's going to be in tier 5, and it took the guy like 20 years. It's beautiful, right? Everything. We are up next. English football and the FA and the way that they manage the sport in their country, we are not even on the map as a footballing country in the United States. And I am a wildly patriotic human being. It hurts to say that, but yeah, We do nothing better than them in the sport.
One change you would implement in US soccer tomorrow.
Bridges between the disjointed leagues. I heavily believe that, honestly, Kareem, I think you and I could do it. We could do it. If you put you and I in a room with these guys, and I said, I'm not leaving this room. Y'all can go about your lives, but I'm not leaving this room for 6 months until I figure out a solution that works for all of these leagues to be aligned in a promotion relegation system so that we can stop killing off our grassroots football clubs. Before that 6 months is over, we're going to have a solution. But they don't have the will, the courage, right? The foresight to do that. So there is no organization that does that. It doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, hopefully we definitely see some change soon in the near future. Most underrated factor in building a successful football club.
Underrated? Discipline. The one that they don't talk about. It takes an extreme amount of discipline, right? Because you have to control so many emotions. It's the best job in the world, Kareem, because there's so much passion in it. But that passion, when you're building a football club, can be your enemy, and you need to have a lot of discipline.
Biggest misconception about lower division football.
That the level of play is miles off from the higher divisions. That's why the FA Cup is the FA Cup. That's why the US Open Cup, before the MLS killed it, was a beautiful thing. Sacramento Republic, loved watching them make a run at the US Open Cup every year. But now it's tainted, right? Because only 5 MLS clubs are in the US Open Cup or some garbage, right? US soccer allowing the US Open Cup to be degraded to what it is the biggest mistake I've seen a footballing federation make. And it showed their true colors of saying, yes, sir, to the MLS. Yes, sir, no problem, right? Although it is a requirement for sanctioning. Oh, just don't get me started. They're clowns, man.
And the last one, long-term vision. What does success look like for you as a owner?
That I die owning Walton Hersham Football Club.
A good goal. All right. Christopher, really appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective. This was a high-level conversation that I think a lot of operators, investors, and stakeholders in the game need to hear. To everyone tuning in, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and follow One Soccer Nation as we continue to bring you decision-grade conversations across the global soccer ecosystem. Until next time, let's keep growing the beautiful game. Christopher, thank you so much.
Thanks, buddy. Have a good one, man.